Hi, my name is Neil from PowerSyncPro, and today I'd like to demonstrate installing the prerequisites for PowerSyncPro Server, but intended for migration agents, so installing all of those components to achieve a device migration or a workstation migration. The first thing I want to show you that this is intended for an on-premises PowerSyncPro server, and the workstation is outside of the firewall. So we have a public SSL cert, and you are going to be performing a port forward from your firewall, for example, onto the PowerSyncPro server and present that externally as your own purchased SSL certificate. So let's look at the requirements. The latest requirements are on our documentation side of the website, powersyncpro.com, but we do need a Windows 2016 or more server. We need ASP.NET Core Runtime 8, but the hosting bundle installed on the server, Visual C++, and we also need access to SQL. So SQL Express 2019 or more is perfectly acceptable. If you've got your own SQL implementation, that is, of course, acceptable as well. But today we're just going to install SQL Express. You do need IIS on the box, Microsoft URL rewrite, and Microsoft application request routing as well. When you come onto the device, we're not going onto the device today, that's in another session, but you will need Windows 10 or 11, and you'll need .NET 8 desktop runtime on the workstation. However, you can deploy PSP migration agent with that encapsulated into the install, so your devices do not have to have that installed. So let's look at the PSP server. I have an empty server here, and it is logged on with a domain account, and that domain account has local admin on this machine. So the first thing I need to do is install .NET Core Runtime 8 hosting bundle. I will pause the video every now and then just so that you are not watching the process actually happen. Fantastic, that is installed. Let's go on to our next requirements, Visual C++, and we shall run that. That's very quick. Now I'd like to run SQL Express. This does take a little while longer. What I'm going to do is allow the basic install to complete. When I do this, it's going to download some files and then install it afterwards. So I will come back to you in 1 or 2 minutes when this is complete. Okay, fantastic. The installation has now completed. Let's go on to our next requirements, IIS. You need to load up a administrative PowerShell here, and I've provided the code. I'm going to install the Windows feature, and I'll come back to you in a few moments when that's complete. Okay, fantastic. Now let's have a look at application request routing. Let's install that. This is a requirement for the endpoint, the HTTP endpoint. And we also need URL rewrite as well. They are very quick to install. All of the links to these MSIs are located in our documentation. The next thing we need to do is install the public SSL cert, which I have purchased from an external certificate authority. I'm going to go on local machine, click next. I need to put in my password, and I'm going to place this in the trusted root certification authorities. Next, firewall. The firewall will be closed on your machine, so therefore we need to open up port 443. Here is a little bit of PowerShell to do that. You can use the GUI if you like. And that's the firewall now opened. Next, we need to enable application request routing proxy. So if I go to IIS, go to this first tab here, application request routing, click on server proxy settings on the right-hand side, and then go enable proxy and apply. You can install SQL Management Studio if you like. I will not for this demo. Now we come on to the PowerSyncPro install. Okay, so I will want to read the license agreement and accept if I so wish. I'm going to do much of the default installation here. I'm not doing remote agents. I'm not doing a proxy agent or a remote password agent, so I do not need this option. This is dedicated for migration agent. I will listen on all interfaces. Because I did a SQL basic install, I need to type in SQL Express here. But obviously, depending on the installation that you have performed or where your SQL instance is, you may need to change some of these options. It will then ask me for the database at which I want to create on the SQL Server. So I need permissions to do that. I can use a local service account, a system service account, or even a group managed service account. Today, I'm just going to use the local system. And I am going to create a reverse proxy. And I'm going to select the SSL cert, which we added earlier, and type in the domain to rewrite to. And now install. I will come back to you when this has completed. It only takes a minute or so. Okay, PowerSyncPro is now installed. The next steps are to update the rewrite rules. This is because we're intending for the PowerSyncPro service to be available over the internet for the workstations to register to, but we don't want that URL to be available and the management console of PowerSyncPro to be available over the internet. We want to restrict the URL to the /agent side of the URL. Therefore, I'm going to use some code which we have on our GitHub to reconfigure the rewrite rules. So if I navigate to there, and then I have this command line with the same endpoint for my SSL cert here. You obviously need to enter in yours. That does restart IIS. Once that has completed, you'll notice that the web config has been backed up in case you need to review that. We have standardized the web.config. So if you did have any other configuration items that you performed on this machine, you will need to now review that and potentially implement them again. The next step is to bind the SSL cert to port 443. So let's go back to IIS. And I'm going to go to the default website. I'm going to go to the bindings. Here is HTTPS. And now I'm going to assign my SSL cert, which should appear there. And I can restart IIS to be sure. Now let's go and see if PowerSyncPro will load. So the local address for PowerSyncPro is localhost port 5000. Fantastic. PowerSyncPro is now installed. The one thing I do want to do is just double check that it's available over the internet. So I'm going to come to a workstation here. And I'm going to load up my internet browser, and I type my external address. Access is denied, which is exactly what the URL rewrite did. If I go to the agent URL, then I now have connectivity for my workstation to register themselves when I come to deploy the software throughout the environment. Okay, thank you for your time.